Let's go to the Speaker of the House, who's with us right now, and who's right in the middle of it. Speaker of the House from Colonial Heights, Republican Kirk Cox. Mr. Speaker, thanks for being with us, sir.
Thanks, John. Always appreciate you having me.
What happened yesterday?
I think it was pretty simple. I think the telling piece yesterday for us was we have a procedural resolution that basically lays out the parameters of a special session. As you know, once the governor calls it, that's up to us. And our procedural resolution said public safety, which allowed the governor to put all of his bills in. It said mental health. It also said that would allow us to do things like some of the Virginia Beach legislation that allowed money for victims and looking at how we can help Virginia Beach. Interestingly, the Democrats put a floor amendment to the procedural resolution in saying the only thing we could consider was gun control legislation. And they said on the floor, which is amazing, we're not going to deal with mental health. We're not dealing with Virginia Beach. We can come back and do that in January. And I think that just summed up all this was a show. And we made the decision, a few weeks ago that it has to be a comprehensive look if you're going to look at this, as Tim Kaine did back in 2007, as we did with Parkland. And so what we did very simply was we went in, we adjourned to a date certain, which is November 18th. We then assigned all the bills, except for the Virginia Beach bills. I want to be clear on this. We actually sent them to appropriations. They can be heard right now, so they don't have to necessarily be delayed. But we sent all the other bills to the Crime Commission. The Crime Commission has gubernatorial appointments. It has representatives from the Attorney General. They have professional staff. They can research what other states do. We've asked them to come back and look at, not investigate themselves, but look at the investigations at Virginia Beach, come back with us with a comprehensive report on all of these bills. And then, long answer, but I'll give you an example. There's some very important bills. Roxanne Robinson, I've been touting this forever, put a great mobile app bill in that will allow a system where the state police develop a system where you can have a tip line, both in schools and local governments, to actually get this information. Has to be a screening process, et cetera. I've discussed this many times on your show. This is if you're a two-time domestic violent abuser, 60 days mandatory minimum. And I've pointed out many times 36 deaths from those people. So we need a comprehensive look. That's what we did. I think it's a prudent thing. I think it was clear the Democrats were simply wanting to have a political election year show, and we thought this was much more of a smart policy proposal.
Okay, it makes sense, Mr. Speaker, the way you're saying it, but you seem to have lost the narrative on this, because I guess a lot of people went there thinking you were going to have to fight this out in committees or something. Each side was going to make their argument, and that never happened. So I see what you're saying, but no one knew this ahead of time, and I guess you couldn't do that, right, because then the Democrats would find a way around it. But I think a lot of people were caught flat-footed by this.
Well, I mean, once again, if we would have gone ahead with the session as planned, the governor had already been very clear he was going to veto about everything we put in. The procedural resolution the Democrats put in made it very clear they weren't even going to pass Virginia Beach victim stuff. And so we were down to, frankly, the only thing they were even going to consider were, we think, Second Amendment bad bills, and we've defeated those before. So that was going to be a 6-day exercise. Remember how long a bill takes to get through, of protest and just nothing but emotion. And that would have been, you're talking about counterproductive. That would have been tremendously counterproductive. And I think as things roll on, I think the key is going to be talking about this procedural resolution the Democrats put in, which I think really, I don't know why they did that. I think it showed their hand. It was very foolish. But, I think as things come out, I think Virginia Beach is going to be furious to know that the Democrats weren't even going to consider their bills. And so that will eventually come out. Obviously, those reports are always a bit slow on our side to come out to tell the entire story. But I think then they'll come out, and we made the right decision. That's what we're down there for. We're down there to make the right decision.
I guess two things, Mr. Speaker, and I get what you're doing. I mean, I really get it. But one of the things that lends one to ask a question about what you just said is on the Senate side. And nobody can get past the fact that Tommy Norman basically put in a bill. So if the strategy was this special session doesn't make any sense, it's a waste of time, these have already been defeated, it's not the right place for it. We're going to send it to committee. Then why is your counterpart, majority leader, putting in a bill at midnight, basically caving one of the issues? Did he expect to adjourn also, or did he just adjourn after? That bill that he put in takes your position and raises question about if everybody was on the same page. Am I making sense at all?
Well, I don't know whether it does or not. I mean, I had worked with Senator Norman and the entire Senate leadership on basically the Crime Commission plan. Remember that the whole plan was to take any bill, whether it is a bill that I would consider very prudent. I've named two of those, Roxanne Robinson's mobile app bill and the obviously the domestic violence bill. But it also took all there were some horrible bills. I mean, you had Adam Levine's bill, which is basically the biggest gun-grabbing bill I've ever seen, which, would, I think been devastating as far as, gun rights. It would not only ban certain types of guns from being bought, but if you currently have those guns, you had to destroy them or turn them in. If you don't, you'd be guilty of a felony. All those bills were sent to the Crime Commission. So I don't know that an individual bill had a whole lot to do with the strategy. I think we decided the Crime Commission would be the best to handle this and get it out of the election year atmosphere. I thought we worked very well with the Senate. I mean, that was coordinated, obviously. And so, from that standpoint, we accomplished, what I thought was a smart public policy thing to do. I mean, that's what I was after, and that's exactly what we did.
All right, so let me ask you this, Mr. Speaker. So here's what the Democrats are claiming right now, and it's a pretty effective narrative that they have that you're going to have to figure out how to circumvent going into the fall elections here. The Democrats are saying that Republicans ran away, that they abdicated their responsibility, that they wouldn't debate the issues, that they wouldn't stand and fight for what they believe in. We've heard a lot of negative feedback from our base today saying that they wanted the Republicans to stand up and defeat these bills. And we understand that maybe some of them would have passed because there were a few Republicans that were in favor of some of this. And personally, I don't have a problem with that because, you go there to vote your conscience. And I think that's why Republicans and Democrats are different. Democrats always seem to stay together. Republicans, various people do what they want. And if Glenn Davis wants to vote for something, he can vote for something. But I think a lot of people see the Democrats now as capturing the narrative because of the way it was handled. I think had everybody known what that strategy was going in, then I think it would have said, okay, well, that makes sense. But it was like kind of after the fact. And so it looks like the Democrats politically have gained the narrative advantage. How do you respond to that, Mr. Speaker?
And I disagree with that. I mean, first of all, remember, all these bills have been defeated before. And so this is nothing new as far as these bills go. My guess is most of them would have been defeated again. You talk about hanging together. We have 51 Republicans, and obviously, we, I thought, had a very cogent strategy, which we, certainly, I thought, did a very good job of executing. And I think we were very clear that, do you want to do good public policy or not? Come on, John. You would have had absolutely nothing as far as rational debate. We'd had nothing as far as factual debate. We'd had nothing about concealed weapons holder being some of those law-abiding citizens. We'd have had what we had in the morning hour, which was an hour and a half worth of speeches that had nothing to do with Virginia Beach. We would have had constant protests for 6 days. We wouldn't have had good public policy debate. Come on. That was not their aim, and you would have seen 6 days of that on steroids. So you're talking about messaging. We'd have had constant discharge petitions to discharge bills out of committee. We'd have had every motion in the world to bypass the regular process, and that would have been covered, obviously, by the press as favorable to the Democrats. So I just totally disagree with your premise. I think it was, people have to make a decision. We've never been afraid of debate. I mean, I've, certainly, I think been very good about that. But I would say that, having a political circus for 6 days certainly wouldn't have been in anyone's interest. And if you're really after good public policy, you would not have gotten it. I mean, they had no interest in that. So I would disagree with that premise. I think it had been a totally unproductive session. I think it would have been extremely emotional. I think it actually would have been worse if it would have gone through. So, and once again, I think as the facts get out that they had no interest in even looking at mental health, you have to be kidding. You would put a procedural resolution in that says we can't do mental health bills. And I think almost everyone agrees that that is probably the signature thing that came out of Virginia Tech. Step Virginia, which is the one that has same-day access for people that are having mental struggles, came out of Virginia Tech. So they're not going to consider that, and that's not an area of criticism. I just fundamentally disagree.
All right, so it's your contention, Mr. Speaker, that going into the election, because like some people are saying, okay, well, if you said you could have defeated, you've already defeated, I think the governor had 6 recommended pieces of legislation, just the governor, right? And then you had all the other pieces from other people, like you said, Delegate Levine and others that were ridiculous. But you've defeated these in the past. So there was a lot of our listeners are saying, well, why not just defeat him again and be done with it? So I guess, and then you can, kick other stuff to the committee. But I guess the question is, let's just put this to bed in no uncertain terms. So a lot of people are saying, well, why not just stay in there, defeat them all again and go home? And what you're saying is that would have been a waste of time of 6 days and turned into a political circus that was counterproductive. Is that my understanding?
I think that's very accurate. It would have been a total political theater. All you had to do was look at the first day, and I think that had been extremely counterproductive. And so, I thought what we did was actually the very prudent thing to do. I've been on this show. I've been on so many different shows. And let's talk about a House perspective here, and let's talk about our Second Amendment friends. We have been, as you know, I think we believe that's a fundamental constitutional right, and we have been very consistent on that. And so and I think that's been a premise that if you look at this session, last session, et cetera, we have, been very, very consistent. And that's what you want out of a legislative body. And we're not kowtowing to any group. It's just that's a fundamental belief. And we've shown that through action. And so, once again, we'll look at what the Crime Commission does. Please remember, we have the legislative prerogative. And so when they come back, we will do what we think is prudent.
We're with Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox from Colonial Heights, Republican. All the House and Senate members for Virginia are up for re-election in November 2019. Kirk Cox has a 2-vote majority, 51 to 49 in the House of Delegates, and current Majority Leader Tommy Norman, who I've been very critical of yesterday for the bill that he put in, which a lot of people were. Bill Stanley resigned a caucus position over it. He was so upset. They lead 21-19. So both chambers hanging in the balance going into November. So, Mr. Speaker, going to this election now after your decision to adjourn yesterday, what is the Republicans' message on guns that you're going to uniformly put out to the voters of Virginia going forward into November, sir?
I think our message on guns has always been very, very clear. There's a Bill of Rights. The Second Amendment is obviously a piece along with the First Amendment. That is a fundamental right. We feel strongly, and I think we said this, that, gun owners are very responsible. If you look in Virginia, they're some of the most law-abiding citizens we have. If you look at states like Maryland, and you look at District of Columbia, and you look at Chicago, we have very restrictive gun control laws. Their crime rates, we have the 4th, lowest violent crime rate. We have the lowest recidivism rate. So what we've done in Virginia has worked, and I think it's been very prudent. We have done a lot on the mental health side, and I think that's where you really address this problem. And I think Republicans have struck a very, very good balance there between being responsible, keeping a fundamental right, and also addressing the problem. And that has come from our side. So I think we've been very consistent on the issue. So I'm speaking from a House of Delegates perspective. That's what, I think if you look at this past session, once again, we had a major tax cut, the second biggest in Virginia history, 5% teacher pay raise, froze college tuition. That was all us. Please remember that if Governor Northam would have had his way, we'd had $1 billion tax increase. He had nothing to do with the college tuition freeze. That was strictly a House initiative. I think we have great messaging to actually run on.
Okay, so one more thing, Mr. Speaker. So what the Democrats are saying today, they're attempting to seize the narrative, and we have to deal with politics because we're going into election. And they're saying that you cut and run, that the Republicans cut and ran. They didn't have the votes. They were going to lose a bunch of votes. And so they pulled us out at the final hour in order to get out of town and kick the can down the road to another time. There's a couple of nasty editorials, one in the fake news Washington Post blasting Republicans on this procedure to adjourn. How do you respond to that, sir?
Well, come on, John. If we'd have been there 6 days and killed them, you'd have had the same nasty editorials. I mean, that's the Richmond Times-Dispatch. I thought had a fairly balanced editorial. And so I would say, once again, that it was nothing to do with cutting and running. I think it was basically, remember what we did. We basically did the same thing that Tim Kaine did in 2007, that we did with Parkland. And let's have a thoughtful process. So our choice was a political circus for 6 days, which, and those bills, I would disagree with that. I think almost all those bills would have gone down. And then none of our bills would have passed. And so you'd have ended up with, once again, 6 days of chaos, which I think would have been, you think the Washington Post is going to write a different editorial after that? I mean, it's
right.
So, I thought it was a responsible move to discuss policy. Sure, the Democrats are going to say that. I think the Democrats were totally caught off guard because they wanted 6 days of a sideshow. And I'm very comfortable with what we did. And I think that as far as protecting Second Amendment rights, you need to look at our record, which has been very, very consistent.
All right, Speaker Kirk Cox, Colonial Heights, I want to thank you for your time today, Mr. Speaker, as always, and elaborating on that. So it looks like you're pretty comfortable with the decision that you made to adjourn yesterday. Hopefully you'll get some fair play in the fake news media that'll be able to give your airing its due. One thing I do agree with you on, it would have been 6 days. We were all prepared for that, quite frankly, and it certainly would have been a political sideshow. That's what the purpose of it was from the governor to begin with. He couldn't have passed any of this. He didn't have the votes, so he wanted to turn into a sideshow, and you were able to circumvent that. So that part of it, I understand. I'm going to say again, though, for those of us following this, the bill that Norman put in at midnight really has taken away from your argument. And I don't know why he did that. He's got to answer for that. But that was the one thing that just put a fly in this whole ointment, if you will, sidetrack the adjournment argument, which now I understand. And I want to thank you for your time, sir, in sharing that with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John.